All right. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming today. And so this is our second workshop, which is speech writing. And the goal of today's workshop is to improve your skills in writing compelling and captivating stories and narratives. Before we begin, I want to introduce my co-facilitator, Christian Sanchez, who will be making this presentation with me. So Christian?
Thank you, Mark. My name is Christian. I'm the co-marketing director for TEDx CSUF. I'm a business major concentrating in entertainment and hospitality management. I'm also taking CTVA classes for fun. Um, I'm very passionate about entertainment and live events. Besides TEDx, I am also the finance director for Entertainment and Tourism Club. I'm a programming coordinator for ASI, so I do concerts and speaker events for students all across the campus. I have a slightly extensive clown and theatrical background in performing and operating. That's what you see on the right side. That's actually a picture of me when I was around 5 years old, or around there, pretty young. And that gets important later on in our presentation. But I believe in the power of telling stories, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I joined TEDx. It's mainly to grow as a student and as a leader and as a speaker as well, but also because I love telling stories and I love helping others tell their story. So that's why I'm so grateful to be here and have the pleasure of helping you all with your stories.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christian. So today we are going to start with some speech writing advice to give you guys some confidence, and then that'll help you to start your speech writing process. Also keep in mind, you are free to tell your story in whatever way you want. We are just providing this advice to give you a foundation and or something to consciously deviate from. Some of this is probably going to be reviewed for you, but it is always good to remember. Christian will then present the 12 steps of the hero's journey, which we hope will provide you with inspiration for finding the key moments you want to highlight from your stories. We will then go into breakout rooms for 10 minutes to practice connecting these steps to your story. And finally, we have a special guest, Professor Gwen Alexis, who is going to be sharing her experiences as a TEDx CSUF presenter. So thank you so much for coming. So let's start with the structure of a speech. So just very quickly, we're going to review the basic organizational structure of a speech. Much like writing a good paper, we introduce a topic, provide the listener with the thesis of the speech, provide the main points, and finish with the conclusion. The thesis is the purpose of your speech, and you should always consider it even when you're just telling a story. It can answer the question of why you are telling this story and what you want the audience to get from your speech. The thesis statement should be persuasive above all else. It should be succinct, complete, and it should be an argument with the goal of persuading. Now we're going to consider some common organizational patterns. So these are different ways to organize your speech structure. Chronological may be the most popular organizational structure for us since we're telling story. However, you can be creative, and here are just a few more to consider. The spatial pattern helps you to paint a picture in the mind of the listener. If you are talking about a scene or an event, then you could introduce the scene and arrange your main points in relation to each other spatially. There is also the causal pattern. This pattern focuses on the cause and effect of the specifics of your topic. The main points are organized addressing the cause and effect of each point. Keep in mind that you can have more than one effect from a single cause or more than one cause for a single effect. There is then the problem solution pattern, which organizes your main points to demonstrate the nature and significance of a problem followed by a proposed solution. The topical organization is used when your main points are subtopics or categories of your speech topic. There is a lot of freedom with this organization as you can arrange the subtopics in any way that makes the most sense to you. Finally, there is the narrative pattern, which follows a narrative. Remember that a complete story has a beginning, middle, and end, so there should still be an introduction, thesis, main points, and conclusion. The most important thing to keep in mind when you're organizing your speech is that there must be a relationship between all of the components of your speech. These patterns are all organized with logical relationships in mind, so you bring your listener along with you for the ride. Next, we're going to talk about some modes of persuasion, and this should probably be familiar to everybody here. Once you understand the objective of your speech, write your thesis, and create a framework for your speech, it's important to consider the foundation of impactful and persuasive speeches. This foundation is ethos, pathos, and logos. To allow the audience the opportunity to truly see things from your perspective, it's important to consider and incorporate all three into your speech. We'll start with ethos. Ethos is credibility. When you establish ethos, then the audience trusts you and you will inspire them to listen to what you have to say. You can establish your credibility through sharing relevant experience or by citing credible sources. Consider the sources you include in your speech. By including universally accepted, unbiased sources, you are demonstrating your discernment and credibility. Pathos is emotion. When you elicit an emotional response from the audience, you invite them to become invested in your story or topic. Personal anecdotes are a great way to do this. You should also try to relate the material you are presenting in a way that appeals to the emotion. Finally, logos is logic. Your argument should include sound logic. Beware of many common logical fallacies. For example, if you were to engage in a slippery slope fallacy, which argues that a catastrophic outcome is assured from simple initial steps, then you risk losing the trust and interest from the audience. By successfully balancing all three elements of ethos, pathos, and logos, you gain the trust of your listeners and improve the chances of your point of view being adopted. These are just some basics of speech writing to consider as you begin. I'm now going to pass the presentation off to Christian to talk about the hero's journey, which is a common template for great storytelling. Christian?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I want to bring this up to you guys. There's this book. It's called The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. It's a book about mythology, specifically the comparisons between the stories and mythology. So, he explains that there's this hero's journey monomyth in which every story kind of follows this structure, and this structure is also used today, and I'm sure you've already heard of it in like an English class or something, but this is a very like solid structure for a story. But it doesn't just go for stories such as like Shrek, Star Wars, Wizard of Oz. It can also be to our stories. In the speech, you can use it to present your information or your statistics in a way that can compel your listener. Uh, for many of you, you may not have half of these steps in your speech, but that's okay. As you see here, there's a series of 12 steps, and they're sprinkled across 3 acts. We see the first act is the ordinary world, and then we're brought into this special world. And in this special world, it's the longest part. But then at the end, we are tied back into the ordinary world, and that's our act. That's our 3 act story. And you can apply this to your speech as well. We have the ordinary world, going to the call to adventure, going to a refusal, going to meeting with your mentor, crossing the threshold, leaving your ordinary world. Now you have some tests, allies, enemies. You approach a cave. You have your ordeal, your climax, and then you have a reward. And then you finally lead back to your road back, your resurrection, and you return with an elixir. These are the 12 steps, and I can assure you some of these might not make complete sense or you might not see them visually. So that's why I'm going to show you visually and show you with some examples. Like I mentioned, you might not have all of these steps in your speech, and that's completely fine because you're not supposed to always have everything. Sometimes your speech might not have a resurrection, it might not have a reward, but you can replace that with something such as like a call to action or the like, how how Mark was mentioning earlier. And I'm going to show you those ways as well. So let's just get into it. Here we go. I'm going to explain a story of myself and kind of walk you through it, how I think about it. in a way that you can structure your speech. For example, the first step is the ordinary world. This is, the start of your adventure. This is the time that you set the stage for the listener. Where are we now? What is normal for us? Are we the protagonist? Is someone else the protagonist? What is normal for them? What is normal for this protagonist? For my example, I'll keep it simple and say that my talk is about the importance of clowns because, how I mentioned before, I was a professional clown. I don't think I mentioned professional, but I was a professional clown for 11 years. And this is the part where you provide background information for your listeners. In a way, this is where you could be credible. When Mark was talking about ethos, pathos, logos, this is where you can gain that credibility. Or just background information on what you're going to talk about. What you want the reader to know. For me, it would be that I grew up in a family business of clowns. Me and my siblings helped my dad with his clown business that he learned from in his neighborhood in Mexico. My cousin also helped, and he was a DJ actually, so we were musically inclined clowns. This is my background. This is my ordinary world. And that's how I presented it. Next up, we have the call to adventure, otherwise known as the catalyst. In like Shrek, this is where he realizes there's a lot of people in the swamp, but then he gets this kind of call to action where he's like, he leaves the swamp, and the same with over here, Anakin, he leaves his parents. But for us, this could be completely different. For example, this is where we break out of our comfort zone. There is a challenge or there is a problem that we can no longer ignore in our ordinary world. This is where you set off to begin your transformative journey. And for many, this you may have not realized it at the time, or you may have, and the same goes with you in your speech. For me, this is when my dad brought me into the family business. This is where I might explain to my audience that this family business, I was brought in when I was 3 years old. I didn't do much because I was a 3-year-old, but I was there. I started experiencing this business, and I didn't do much. I was sitting around in a clown outfit, but that's where it all began. That was my call to adventure. I had a job, and it was to make others laugh and have a good time. That's my call to adventure for my story. And then we have the refusal of the call. This is resistance to change. With change, there's always that resistance to change. In a persuasive presentation, this is your chance to play devil's advocate. You might have told the listeners your thesis in the previous 2 steps. Well, this is where you could play the devil's advocate and present the opposing data. In a story, this can be our protagonist digging their feet in and showing reluctance to begin their journey. For me, this was nearly my whole life. I would be resistant to go to work. It was on Saturdays, and people looked at me funny. I didn't like being a clown. What my job is to have people make fun of me. I refuse that. That's where I kind of have this part in my story where there was some change, and kind of leads up to why I'm talking about it. Why am I doing this? Next up, we have meeting the mentor. We all need a helping hand. In this step, we get a personal trainer. This mentor could be an activist. It could be a YouTube video. It could be a news article. These are some of the more examples that might come from your speech. It might be a news article. It might have been a story on the news or something that kind of inspired you, that taught you something. This is where that mentor will give you, or whatever protagonist you have in your story, the tools that they need to advance to the next stage. This is the next stage is crossing the threshold. The next stage is going into our special world. It's kind of the push for your talk. It's the reason for your talk. In your story, this is where you could talk about that professor or teacher that gave you the extra push to chase your goals. This is the parent who supported you, or the friends that held you up. For me, It was my dad. He was the one who started the clown business. He started this business to provide food for our family, but he started it way before, even back in Mexico, how I explained. But I never knew why. It's also not like he ever talked to me about the importance of being a clown. For me, this step is simply seeing my dad struggle and his motivation to perform. This is what strikes something in me to pursue finding out what it means to be a clown. It's kind of my reasoning for wanting to talk about this right here. So, next, how I explained, we have crossing the threshold. It takes courage. Now we're committed to the journey. Shrek is approaching the castle here. Luke is learning the ways of the Force. For us, it might be completely different. Um, excuse me. For me, this was my pursuit to find that meaning of why, what's the importance of being a clown? Like, why is this a thing? In our speeches, many of us might not have anything to say through this step, but it's important that it's there because if you remember, this is where you start taking us into your special world. This is the beginning of the meat of your presentation. If not anything, you should take away that you kind of want to bring us back through your presentation to that ordinary world in the beginning. And this is kind of that part where we stray away from that. We bring the listeners in with us into our story so that they're motivated to learn more and like experience what we're experiencing, what we're talking, so that they can take something out of what you're talking about. And with that, next comes our inside of our special world, the tests, the allies, and the enemies. This is often the longest stage for a hero. They're thrust into a world of unknown. Harry Potter fights a troll, falls off a broomstick, and almost dies. Marlin in Finding Nemo, he meets reformed sharks, swims through a jellyfish field, and is swallowed by a whale. In a presentation, this could be where you present the message you want your listeners to take home with them. For me, this is where I might give examples of how the clown business was. Some parties were very pleasant with no issues at all. I even made friends at some parties. I mean, I was surprised to be popular at all, being the clown, being the butt of a joke. Still trying to understand why. But then other parties, there were drunk and nasty people, interactions and fights that you may not want a child to see. People not wanting to pay my father or claim that he scammed or calling the police. This is where I learned how much my father had to go through. Even when he could make so many people laugh and have a great time, there were still so many issues. So I wanted to know, why did he keep pursuing this as a job? I know to make money, but there had to be another reason. Why this and not anything else? Next step, we have kind of leading into that. The approach to the innermost cave. There's no turning back after this. Well put. The innermost cave is less about being in the cave, but more about approaching it. And this cave can be just a symbol for your story. It could be the dragon's lair, or it could be your own negative feelings, or someone else's negative feelings, or a situation happening socioeconomically in our world. This is the stage that is essential in preparing us to grow in order to defeat a villain or conquer our hurdles or solve a problem that we like showcase in the beginning of this presentation. For my talk, this is a very specific time in my life where we were not getting as much work as we used to. I am now almost finishing middle school, about to start high school. My older siblings already stopped being clowns. They hated it. I didn't hate it, but I was just trying to understand it. And now I was trying to understand why I didn't leave, yet my siblings did. Maybe they weren't as curious in the purpose of being a clown as I was. Next up, we have the ordeal. It's time to prove yourself. For many, this could be your climax. This could be where you do explain the problem if you didn't explain it before. But this is where we are tried and tested. This is where the protagonist might be tried and tested. You've hit rock bottom, and if you survive it, you will emerge transformed. These are the things that we have to do to conquer the challenge, kind of thing. I guess for me, for my story, for my speech, it would be I was the last sibling to be in the business. And at this point, we were a troop of three, when in the past, we were a troop of five. Honestly, I was getting really sick of it. I mean, I was going into high school. Why am I the last one to be, to, help with the family business of being a clown? My siblings left, but because I'm the last one, I can't really leave. I can't leave my dad alone in the business with my cousin. It just isn't the same without all of us. And I wanted to leave really badly. I was entering high school, but then something happened. This is my ordeal. This is like my problem. This is what kind of striked it through the story. This is the problem and not really the reason why, but uh, next up comes with the what something happened, the reward, making it all worthwhile. This is kind of where in a story the protagonist sees a light at the end of the tunnel. There's hope. In this picture, it's Luke from Star Wars rescuing Princess Leia, and they have like the plans for the Death Star. There's hope. But in a persuasive presentation, this is where we could show what we are doing to help our cause. This is what we are doing to back our message. In your ordeal, maybe you were explaining the problem with the increased statistics of homelessness in America. Maybe you were talking about the added effects which harm our community even more. This could be this reward part could be where you explain what you or another company or individual or community have been doing to mitigate that. Um, this is where you could showcase that. And for me in my story, if we're following along, this is when I stopped being a clown. Uh, for me now, it doesn't look like a reward, but at the time, I mean, it was a great reward because as I mentioned before, I kind of hated it at the time, and I kind of didn't want to do it anymore. I was getting old. I was going into high school. I didn't really want to be a clown, and I still never understood, why people are clowns in the first place. And it's actually rather disappointing for me. But I mean, at the time, it was a great reward. At the time, there were rumors and trends about killer clowns in the neighborhood. I don't know if you remember that, but that was going viral on the media. Everyone was super scared about these like clowns that were like killing people. And I mean, people were afraid of clowns far more than they ever were. So then my father, he was too scared for the sake of our family. He didn't want us to put in any further danger, so we retired. We weren't getting many gigs at the time anyway, and in part it was because of this reason. Later in high school, I find myself pursuing theater. I was actually the comedic relief most of the time. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? So that goes into the next step, the road back. Returning home. This is where we come back to the ordinary world, where we tie everything back together. Um, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel that our hero saw might be further than we thought. There's still ways in your story that you could talk about it. This is where you start talking about uh, why everything you talked about matters. This is the part where our hero must return to the ordinary world and must deal with the aftermath of their actions, if there was any. Facing more danger. Uh, for me, this is when I realized the impact being a clown had on me. I started realizing why I loved making people laugh. I see the faces of the people at our clown parties. They were always so joyful. In high school, I started seeing a lot more sad faces in the world. I guess I never noticed it before, but being human comes with a lot of sadness. There's a lot of ups and downs, and sometimes it feels like there's way too many downs. That's what I kind of discovered in this road back. So that's what I would write about in my speech. But then we have the resurrection. It's the true test. This for many, this is like the true climax of a story where the last test is met, sort of like a final exam. We're tested once more to see if we really learned the lessons gained from the ordeal. If this was like a story. These are the final obstacles to face. For me, this is when I took a bunch of math classes. thinking I really wanted to be an engineering major in high school. Uh, but I was unhappy with that choice. I mean, I wasn't super happy about, wanting to be an engineer. Senior year, I thought I was applying to colleges to be an engineer until, memories of my clown history came back to me. I wasn't a happy camper during the jobs, but I was deep, deep inside. I loved performing and creating stories or shows. I scrapped the engineering path and applied to study entertainment. That, for me, that's my resurrection. That's me, uh, in my story, finding out, closer to uh, why it mattered to me if I understood what being a clown meant, um, and finally understanding it. So next, after this resurrection, for others, this resurrection could be talking about the problems, like in the homelessness example, talking about the problems in the future, scoping out the future problems that could occur, and what might you do to solve it, or what might you inspire others to do to solve it, kind of thing. And then we have our final step, the return with the elixir. This is the final step of our journey. We return home a different person that when we started. We return with the elixir, whether that be a physical object or a lesson learned. For those who are giving presentations meant to motivate their audience, you want the listener to feel like they've returned with the elixir, a new perspective or insight that they had not before. This may also be where you call to action, or you leave a statement, and that would stay with your listeners. Uh, this is like the impact of your speech. For me, this is me in college. I am now pursuing entertainment in greater lengths than I ever imagined, and I know why. It was those faces in the crowd that inspire me every day. People work tirelessly and have tons of downs in the ups and downs cycle, but being a clown was like a selfless act. A clown in its own symbol is kind of trying to help people with those downs, make sure that they have those ups in random times of their life, in special occasions or whatever it may be. That was the purpose of a clown, um, feeding into that happiness, that joy, that community that brings other people together. That was the importance of being made fun of on purpose, and that I finally understood, and I could finally share with others why that's important in a way that other people can implement it in different ways. This is my story, and I kind of just broke it down into these 12 steps, but you can break it down into shorter steps, you can break it down in other steps, and this just helps you kind of try to make sure that you structure your story into writing. um, it's not a way that you should be presenting everything, but this is a way that you can write everything down in a coherent way that can have your listener be actively engaging. uh, and as such, when Jen explained last week, a story has power. Stories can connect, persuade, motivate, and encourage us. A story can spread ideas and inspire us to think from a new perspective, and that's kind of the point of this whole story arc. Here are the 12 steps in their entirety, um, and you can use them to help you in any way that you can, or not. But in a way, just take with you that there's a certain path to your story, and if you follow a certain structure in any way that you find it, then your reader will take home that last message that you want to leave with them. Last week in your workshop with Mark and Jen, you brainstormed a story or a topic that matters to you. Today we're going to practice speaking about that topic using this hero's journey monomyth in any way that you can. So we're going to move into the activity. We want to turn your idea or topic from last week into a story. In breakout rooms, you will practice talking about your topic or story you thought of last week using the hero journey structure. It's okay if your story doesn't line up exactly with the structure. The goal is to think of different ways to share your information. Find a few key points in your story that line up with one or more of the stages in the hero's journey. But I hope this helped. and we can go right ahead into the activity, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Christian. So we're going to do just a couple breakout rooms. I think we'll just do two. And so just talk about, or actually let's do three, make it a little bit more intimate. And yeah, just do what Christian said and talk about how your story aligns with any of these, or just kind of find ways that this can connect with your story and then connect with the listener. Like that's the whole point, is to connect with the listener. So we'll just do 10 minutes and then we'll be back. So we'll just be a quick little breakout session. And then Gwen, I'm just going to assign you to a breakout room just so you can hear the conversations. You're not just like left out of what's going on. Yeah, okay, sounds good. Okay, see you guys soon. Okay, so it is now my pleasure to introduce Professor Gwen Alexis. Professor Gwen Alexis began her teaching career as dance and drama teacher for the children at St. Rita's School in East New York, Brooklyn in 1995. She earned her undergraduate degree from SUNY Empire State College with a Bachelor of Science in Performing Arts. She earned her Master of Arts in History with a specialization in United States history from CUNY City College. She now teaches online for John Jay College of Criminal Justice in the History Department. She is extremely honored to teach for 9 years in the African American Studies Department at California State Fullerton University. Teaching at California State University Fullerton and John Jay College of Criminal Justice is truly a dream come true for Professor Alexis. And she is also an alumni of Titan Talks and a previous TEDx CSUF presenter. So let's everybody welcome Professor Gwen Alexis.
Hey. Hello, everyone. Hey, Jen.
Well,
hey.
So I'm just going to get right to it and start with our first question. What did you give your speech on, and how did you know that it was the right topic for you?
Well, I gave my speech on how I learned to teach, and I didn't know at first. I had Kira and Celine, and we're a team. So it took me some time to figure out what topic was right for me. I kind of knew what I wanted, but I wasn't sure what I wanted. So we would meet and they helped me, figure it out. So I didn't have a clear vision because I didn't know how TEDx works.
Yeah.
I've seen it on there and I thought people just get up there and with their papers and talk. I didn't know.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think for me to choose a topic is not overwhelming, but it's pretty stressful to think about committing to a topic, and the idea of working with other people or even just speaking out loud about your topic, then you kind of get a sense of if it's right for you. Is that kind of how that worked for you?
You know what? It's so funny. Sometimes when you're writing a speech, the topic finds you after the speech is like in the middle or at the end, and the topic goes, oh, there you are, topic. Why you didn't tell me in the beginning? I wouldn't have spent all this time searching for you. So it was an experience.
Yeah. So don't be afraid just to start writing.
Start writing.
Yeah.
Just start writing.
Awesome.
That's the best thing you can do.
Great. Our next question is, what do you wish that you knew about the speech writing process before you got started for your TED Talk?
I've been in acting, and I mean, since I was in my late teens, I've taught. I never knew how to write a speech. I'm going to tell all of you, it was Salim and Kira, and I always give credit where credit is due. I wish I had known this sooner, it would have made my life easier when I had to write a speech. I never knew there were steps. I never knew, I knew what a thesis statement is, but I really didn't tie it to speech writing. And until I would come to the Titan Talks, I would come on Saturdays because I enjoyed myself. It gives me a chance to be the student. So I I didn't know a lot. I learned so much from Celine and Kira on how to write a speech
Hmm,
from A to Z.
awesome. Thank you. How did you get to the heart of the message that you wanted to share? Do you feel like you were successful in achieving your message?
You know what? I spoke from the heart. So I believe I was successful because my speech was about how I learned to teach. And like I said, it came to me. And I feel like I was successful because everything I was saying was how I was feeling. I didn't have to put any kind of, anything in there to just make the audience go, ooh, ah. I just talked. I just told my story. And when I told the story, it looked like I was just telling the story, but I wasn't. I was just, because I had help putting it in a way that I could tell the story, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
If you see, when we started, Celine and Kira, I had pages, I had pages of notes, and then they would say, okay, let's cut this down, come back with this, let's do this. So by the end, I was telling my story and I was speaking from the heart. And it's like Christian was saying about how you went and got that elixir and you brought it back. I got the elixir and I knew what I was going to do with it.
Mhm.
I had it in my hands, and that the way I wrote the speech, and I knew what I was going to do with it. So I feel like I spoke to the audience. I really think I did, because it was so together the way um Kira and Celine, and I give them, because they really worked with me. I
Yeah,
I never knew. I never knew.
yeah. And it sounds almost like um, you this is your story and you could have just talked about it, but then you went through this process of like really honing in on your message and kind of creating something really intentional, and then
Mhm.
you are able to go back to that more conversational approach once you had the real meat of the thing you wanted to talk about.
Yes, yes. And with speech writing, sometimes we get off topic. We know what we want the thesis to be. We understand, but we'll get off. And whenever, that's why you need a good team, or you have to let somebody read it for you, because when you get off, you have to be dragged back, because you don't want your speech to be all over the place and you have a bunch of different topics. And then you lose the audience because they're like, but weren't they
Yeah,
talking about, but now, so I can be scattered. So I had to focus, and it was an experience, and I'm so happy I did it. It will make me a better speech writer in the future.
yeah,
I really was. And a lot of the speeches I've given, they're they're scattered. They've been all over the place. And I come back to the point, but this will make me focus and take a path that leads to where I want to go. I can get the elixir, I can bring it back.
hmm,
Yes. Hmm.
yeah. And that's the thing that everybody was going towards, was that elixir, not this elixir and that elixir and this elixir, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
So I dropped some. Oh, here I got it. Oh, here it is. So I was just, it really made me. I was just so impressed. That's why I'm still here. You can't get rid of me. I'm
yeah,
like,
no,
I love Titan Talks. I
yeah.
love to
Well, we're
just
happy to have you. You're welcome anytime, of
say
course.
thank you, thank you.
Um, our final question is, what advice would you like to give the students as they begin the process of sharing their stories?
Well, don't look at this as just TED Talk. Look at this as your future, because in order to be a success in the world when you go out there, this Titan Talks and TEDx teaches you how to present yourself on a job interview, how to present yourself, if you're doing a big presentation. It teaches you how to write. So when any of you go out, this will come back. If you have a big interview and you're so nervous, because the real world awaits, it's right outside the door. When you get that degree, boom, there it is. And if you can remember what you were taught here, remember the steps along the way. all of those apply to life. And it really helps you to say, okay, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go X, Y. I'm going to listen. I'm going to be able to remember. I'm going to be able to ask questions because I'm not talking. I'm hearing what the person is asking. And I've done this with the TED Talks. I can use some of these rules. So that's what is really important about this is it gives you a chance to be a superstar, not only in the university, but in life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming back and talking with us and speaking with us.
Always. And thank you all so much. And break a leg, everyone. I'll be at the next conference.
Cool. Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Cool. So our next task for next week is it's time to get that pen to paper. It's time to start writing. And we request that you have a rough draft, rough. It can be as rough as need be, but have that ready for our next meeting, which is going to be in 2 weeks because spring break. So everybody gets to enjoy spring break. And then we'll be back for our third workshop, which is about editing the speech that you will have made. So that's the task. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to stay on and talk with us. So that's it. Thank you so much. I'll stop the recording.